welcome to If These Walls Could Talk.
Yay.
I'm Wendy Stuart.
Well, then I'm Tim Moss.
Oh my God,
Yay.
you must be. That's what I said to myself when you walked in the door.
Yes.
There goes Tim Moss. How is everyone doing today? We have had such incredibly busy weeks. So Tim and I, before it even started, I'm like, oh my God, Tim, what did I do in the last week?
I had to look on Facebook and go back.
Thank you for doing that. But I usually memorize everything that you did.
Right.
And
right.
I'm like, oh, you know what keeps sticking out in my head? Idaho.
Oh yeah. Well, that's coming up.
I know, but I
just
can't get it out of my head. Idaho, Idaho, Idaho. Tell us about what you've been up to.
Oh my goodness. Well, 50 Shades of Gay and Lube, and we're doing all of this stuff right now. Basically, what's coming? I was out on Fire Island yesterday, so that's why I'm a little tan.
Oh, you
I
are
got a little
very
sun.
tan.
And Little House on the Ferry, which is a show that I did down in Florida. Scranton is going to be doing it.
Yay.
And they had never been to Fire Island. So they said, I would like to go out. So I said, pick me up on your way. And they picked me up. I took them out and showed them around Fire Island yesterday.
And
it was
you took
a
them on the
fabulous
ferry.
day.
You took them on the ferry.
We
They
went
had
on the
never
ferry.
been on the ferry.
Nope.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I did a Fire Island run yesterday, which was a lot of fun. And they loved it. And it makes sense now in the script that they have. So I'm glad that we did that. But this weekend, I'm hosting Bronx Pride at Crotona Park Amphitheater.
Hi, Apollonia Cruz.
And the following week, we're in, where are we? In Providence, Rhode Island, doing Lube, which is a parody of Grease. Lube.
Love it. I can imagine.
It's pretty nasty. But then the following week, we're in Boise, Idaho, doing 50 Shades of Gay. And then 2 weeks after that, I'm in Fort Lauderdale at the pub. Anybody in Fort Lauderdale? The pub on Saturday, August 13th, and I'm going to be taking my critically acclaimed cabaret show down there. So,
oh my gosh. What? Whoa.
So I've got like all these shows. Every time I'm going out of town, it's a different show. So literally in my room, I've got like bags, my costume bags lined up. I just grab a bag, put it in the suitcase, and take off.
Because I imagine what you're wearing for Lube. You're
Actually,
not
I'm
wearing
in
for your
drag.
cabaret.
Actually, I'm in drag. I play the Olivia Newton-John role. Yeah. So
I totally.
it's quite fun, especially with the beard.
Well, this week, I have to share this with everyone. Our amazing producer, Chauncey Dandridge, was knighted by the Imperial Court of New York for all the incredible community service that Chauncey does. He is the most low-key person in the world. He'll never tell you this himself. And he does tons in our community.
Absolutely.
I loved seeing him get knighted. What that meant was he was down on his knees.
Again.
And our former Empress, Sugar Be Real, was standing over him with like a sword or whatever you want to call it. She had to tap him 3 times on each shoulder. To me, it looked like it was going to be a beheading, but what do I know? And I was very excited to also get an award that day. I had no idea that, well, thank you. I had no idea that was coming. I was in recovery, though, from the day before. I was on the Jelly Bean Benitez party cruise. Disco. You all remember Jelly Bean Benitez, Madonna's original boyfriend at Danceteria, got her started. I didn't have the chutzpah to go up to him and say, Jelly Bean, could you play a Madonna song? The one I wanted him to play was If Madonna Calls, I'm Not Here. I thought that was pretty funny. Shout out to Alexis Flame. We celebrated her amazing birthday with videos of Alexis playing one after the next. What a talented performer. And speaking of talented performances, Christmas in July with the Imperial Court on the 24th at Industry Bar. So I'll be reminding you of that. And then on the 29th is Otto's Shrunken Head. It's Evan Lawrence presents with a wonderful show. And then there's some other shows I have in there. Tim, like you, I have 3 calendars.
Actually, I forgot. I'm going to see Company tonight.
Oh my God.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that.
So you're going to be singing all those tunes.
Yeah, for the next week.
For forever.
Here's to the ladies.
Right. Oh, I just love that. So we're such busy New Yorkers, right? And because we're such busy New Yorkers, we love having people on the show.
But also, as you can tell by the way we're dressed, it's summertime.
It's summertime.
So summertime means festivals.
Right. Festivals.
There's a lot of outdoor activities.
And as we roll into September, we're going to be having an incredible New York festival that celebrates Greenwich Village and downtown. This festival is called the Village Trip, where beat where the beat lives on. I love that. And the beat lives
which,
on.
Which we'll explain as
we will.
in the interview.
And our guests are going to explain it too, because we want to welcome our publicity director, Dan Sheffey, and our joint artistic director, Cliff Pearson. Come on in.
Yay.
Now, this is the first time we're doing 4 people on this show today, so just bear with us as we're getting cozy. We're all getting cozy here. How is everybody today?
Cozy.
Okay,
Hey,
Wendy has to slide over. They told me when my shoulders cut off, I'm in the right
Oh my
place.
gosh! Look at us. We're all in
Look,
here.
oh my God, we're
look
on
at that.
TV. Look at us, we're on TV. First of all, thank you,
Hi.
thank you so much
Hi.
for coming on here today. And kudos to you for what you're doing for New York. You know, I'm
Absolutely.
so over like the negative stuff that you hear. Why are we in New York? Because there is no place like it in the world, and the arts is still thriving here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And we are coming out of this pandemic. And if we don't have people like you doing a 2-week festival to celebrate Greenwich Village and downtown, if we don't have that, what do we have? Right. So thank you for what you're doing for our arts community
And for our city.
and for our city. So
and it's fun. That's
it's
the whole
really
idea.
fun.
It's fun.
Well, you guys both look like you have a lot of fun.
I'm so
We better
working on
be.
it.
Yes, exactly.
So
We are today.
I think we'll just start like one at a time, right?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Does that work for you, Tim?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we got
So Cliff Pearson,
That's
tell
me.
us a little bit about your history, where you come from, and what
Okay.
line of work.
So I'm actually a journalist. I write about architecture. So buildings, things that actually don't move or
Interesting.
not supposed to
love it.
move.
Hopefully don't move.
But I've lived in the West Village for most of the last 4 decades.
Oh, wow.
And last January or February, when we were starting to get the vaccines rolled out, and people were starting to emerge from their hibernation, you know, I felt like I needed to do something to help out. I've been very fortunate. I hadn't gotten sick. My wife hadn't gotten sick. So I said, well, what could I do? And I said, well, maybe we could do like an arts festival for Greenwich Village, because the village is all about the arts.
Absolutely.
So I made a couple of phone calls, and somebody said, oh, there's someone who's already doing that. And I went, really? And they got me in touch with this sort of crazy English woman, a British woman who lives in London, who started the village trip back in 2018.
Get
Oh,
out.
wow.
So
Wow.
that's Liz Thompson.
Yeah.
And hey, Liz. So I Zoomed with her, and to her credit, and her, instead of her saying, hey, buddy, buzz off, this is my turf, she said, let's do this together.
Oh, I
So-
love that.
Collaboration.
Yes.
Which actually worked out really well last year, because we weren't allowing anyone in from the UK to come in, even though she was vaccinated. She had the AstraZeneca vaccine. Anyway, she had to sneak into the US last year
Get
after
out.
quarantining in the Caribbean.
Oh,
for
my
8
goodness.
days.
Okay, well, that's I don't feel so bad for her now. She quarantined in the Caribbean. That's fine. I'm not feeling bad.
And she
Now you're feeling
arrived
better.
like about a week before the festival started last year.
Wow.
So then, you know, we worked on it together. Luckily, you know, through Zoom and everything,
Yeah.
it worked out.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing. You are a hardcore New Yorker. You knew all about John Gotti when we were
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
before the
So
show.
where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay.
So my father grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and he left the city as quickly as he could. I grew up in the suburbs and got out of there as quickly
Yeah.
as I could.
No, you brought out a good point, though. That's really how it was.
Yeah,
They had
yeah.
that flight to the suburbs,
Uh-huh.
and the kids from the suburbs, of course, want to
Like,
be
I
back
want to
here.
get back in the city.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wanna be
yeah,
back in the
definitely.
city.
I mean, I was like you. The one thing I knew was I got to get out of Stamford.
Right, and my thing was, I know I'm going to Africa, so
So
yeah.
now you, when you left Stanford, you came to the village?
Yeah, well, I bummed around Europe with a backpack.
with a
Sweet.
Euro pass, you had a Euro
With a
pass.
Euro
I
pass,
remember
exactly.
the Euro pass.
So that was in 1978. And when I got back here, I came into the city, lived on the Upper West Side for like about a year. I think I was spending $125 for a tiny room that had been the maid's room in this grand apartment.
That
on the
was
Upper
like
West
the late
Side.
70s.
This was
That's-
1978.
That's
yeah.
when I was there at the
Yeah.
same time. I was at 322 West 80th in a
Yeah.
$500 a month,
Over by Riverside.
amazingly stunning, 12-foot ceilings, wood
Yep.
burning fireplace, $500 a month.
Yep.
Right. Well, my
Now-
own
Now it
apartment.
would be 3,500.
Yeah,
or
oh,
or
probably
6,000
more.
or
Yeah.
even more. They sold the
Absolutely.
building.
Yeah, so I was on
Wow.
97th and Riverside. Eastside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me
Yeah,
tell you
I
something
like
about that neighborhood in
Yeah.
those days.
Oh,
Ooh, that was
completely different.
really
Oh,
dicey.
yeah.
You could-
Right. That was
you
tough.
know,
That was a tough
yeah,
neighborhood.
it was heroin city. I remember going up there thinking if I could buy an apartment, that's where I could afford.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have been safe there. New York at that time was filled with
Yeah.
SROs, right?
Yep.
Single room occupancies and lots of drug dealing going
Oh, yeah.
on.
Yeah.
etc.
On 97th Street between Broadway and
Yeah.
Riverside,
I know
there were
that bar.
3 SROs.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
And most of them were harmless. They were mostly older men,
Uh-huh.
you know, who used to have jobs and used to be somewhat, you know, functional, and then, you know, alcohol just got to them.
Mhm.
But in some ways,
That happens to most older men. No, I didn't mean that. It was
something to
terrible.
look forward to.
That's a good joke.
But it actually
was a bad
served
joke.
a purpose because there was a place for these people to go.
Right.
Today,
Right.
we don't have any place for those people to go.
Exactly.
Right,
Right.
right. And thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
That is the very problem that we have in the city. Now,
So
yeah.
Dan Sheffey.
Damn.
Hey, so I'll start earlier. So I came here from Philadelphia, and
Okay.
I came here to,
Philly.
so that's, I'm a Philadelphia kid, and I came to New York to be a TV producer. And so I worked at Good Morning America and CBS
Oh,
News and
fun.
Entertainment Tonight. And then I went into the movie business on the publicity and marketing side.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
cool.
and I worked at Disney on the Touchstone Hollywood Pictures and Touchstone Hollywood and Disney. Yeah.
In Disney,
Did
could-
you
could
did you
all
work
of
out of New York?
I
on
did.
those?
I ran the
Oh,
New
that's
York,
nice.
them. You ran it. Wow.
East Coast Publicity Office.
Sweet.
Marketing publicity. So
Now, you also you worked for GQ.
I did.
Mhm.
I did.
Can I tell you, my husband that does the lighting for this show had a whole magazine, GQ, dedicated to his
Really?
editorial work. Yeah,
Wow.
we have it. It's one of a kind.
And
So
just real quick, speaking of Alan
Yeah.
Kaplan, who is here,
hi, Alan.
his artwork is premiered here at PANGEA.
Yes,
So,
and
it
oh my
is
God.
for sale.
Thank
I
you
saw
so
it.
much for saying that, Tim, because the 22nd of July, we're having a party here. So if you're listening in, all are welcome, I've been told. It is going to be from 6 to 8 on the 22nd of July. So,
Wow.
so there you
So
go. So
Dan
GQ.
Sheffey, sorry about the
Yeah, but
distraction
no,
there.
no.
no.
Yeah,
Back
we
to
live in
the-
a
back
permanent
to-
state of promotion.
Absolutely.
That's how
Yeah,
you're
which you
why you're here
understand.
today.
Exactly. And then so GQ and all these other things I've done. And actually, Cliff and I both worked at Condé Nast together.
Oh,
No,
When
okay.
I was at GQ and at Fairchild,
No,
Cliff-
I actually wasn't at Condé Nast. I was at
Oh.
McGraw Hill.
but I always thought of
Oh.
you as being at Condé Nast. That's funny.
See, I have that Condé Nast air to me,
Sorry, that's
but
right.
I had the McGraw
But
Hill.
I knew you when I was at Condé Nast. That's
Yeah,
what
maybe.
okay.
I think you're like more McGraw Hill than me. Like Condé Nast, you don't seem. I knew a lot of people there, but
I don't have the clothes to be at Condé Nast.
yeah, you're definitely you're a journalist.
Yeah.
You're hardcore.
Need the
Yeah.
cigar.
Love
Work
it.
on that.
So
So Dan,
Yeah.
yeah, you were
And
saying
then I
continue.
I don't exactly know where I was, but I'll
Oh,
pull it back.
it's all
So
good.
I got connected to Liz and Cliff last fall. Cliff and I already knew each other, and I was working with an old colleague of mine, I should say, longtime colleague of mine.
Mhm.
And so I came in sort of at the last minute to help with some of the publicity messaging and getting the word out because it was sort of
right.
a little bit of a crunch. And then I've continued on, which has been great. And so
Mhm.
I'm also working on some of the programming. I live in the East Village now.
Okay.
Nice.
So I live 2
Not far
blocks from here.
Where did you live prior to being here?
I lived on the Upper West Side for a long time.
Another
Mhm.
Upper
Yeah,
Wester.
I was on 80th between Columbus and Amsterdam.
Oh my God! And I was
Oh,
at
okay.
322 West Day. Oh,
And I had an office on 80th between Amsterdam and Columbus.
That's my block.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
oh, we'll talk.
Oh my God. Yo, we're passing each other like ships in the night. I
And
love when that happens.
And I came to the East Village 20 years ago.
Oh, so you
Yeah.
are hardcore.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mine was between
Yeah.
Broadway and Amsterdam. Sorry.
Okay.
But you were still on
Okay.
80th.
Yeah.
Block East, Block West.
But
Yeah.
you came here, 20 years ago. The
Yeah.
neighborhood really wasn't gentrified then. It was
It
on
was
its
on the
way.
way.
It was
Yeah,
on its
it
way,
was-
but not
you're
Oh,
right.
like
80th Street. Yeah, right there. That was fine.
yeah.
That
No,
was-
but here I'm
No,
talking about
oh,
20 years
here.
ago.
Village,
Here,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. That
It was
was
just started the
Yeah,
gentrification
yeah.
here. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen so many changes
A lot.
since.
Yeah.
yeah.
since you came.
And
here.
arguably, I'd be part of that. So yeah,
Yeah.
No, it's okay. You're okay.
I'm-
You're a good guy.
I'm-
You're a good guy because you're doing something for businesses here,
Yeah.
for the artists here.
Yeah.
Okay, and for the downtown neighborhood,
Yeah.
you know, if
No, it's
everybody
great.
did that, we would. I say reclaim our city. Okay,
Yes.
these huge high rises that are my neighborhood. I don't even recognize the Upper East Side anymore. Who is
And the
in the
corporation.
it's
coming in,
horrible.
yeah.
right? At apartments that start at $3 and $4 million for a studio. Wrong. And you know what? I'm off on a tangent. It's okay. Let's just keep going.
But well, Dan, I've got a quick question about you as
Sure.
far as like the promotion and
Yes.
because you were doing that in what, the 80s, 90s,
Which?
2000s.
which part?
Oh, any
Disney? Yeah.
the promotion.
89, yeah.
Have you found a difference in that industry since then because of like the internet and
Well, yeah. I mean, there's two things that have
There's been a
happened.
huge
A lot of
shift.
it's the disruption of the internet and
Disruption.
Yeah.
and new media, because old media and newspapers and magazines have been
Well, even television.
and
Right.
television too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I worked in TV, there were 3 networks.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody was watching the
Right.
same thing.
Everybody had, it was a shared
Right.
experience. It was the same thing. And now it's all over the map and
Dan,
it's
I
very
liked
niche
it.
and very,
I did.
very,
I liked it at 3 networks.
Yeah.
I too, Tim, 2,000
We were all-
channels. You're sitting there with a remote. You don't know what to watch. I inevitably end up just on Netflix because it's just okay. This is Netflix.
But by the time you get through the
It's
the
horrible. I
guide,
don't like
you've
it.
missed the show you wanted to watch in the
Yeah.
first place.
Exactly. Really good point. It's not better that we
Yeah.
have all these choices. I don't know why anyone would think
But
that.
people, especially like the younger kids now, will go because when I grew up, I lived in watching television.
Right.
Now they live on the internet,
Right.
and so they're not necessarily tuning into television as a medium for promoting things.
Right.
You know, so
Well,
it's
they
very
also-
Right,
odd.
there
It's
you
a very
go.
strange
television
time.
is much more experienced as this or a box or a tablet rather than something big.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the other side of that is I still like to go to movies.
Yeah.
Like
Yes,
like
yeah.
a real
And eat
movie.
the popcorn.
What a dinosaur.
I know.
Yeah.
That's Dan the dinosaur, right?
Yeah.
No,
I think
I
Dan the Man's
So
better.
much.
I like Dan the Man, but I completely agree with you. There's nothing like seeing a great film on the big screen. Like when you saw West Side Story, Tim,
Oh, on the
You-
big screen. That
you
was
couldn't
memorable.
stop talking about it. And your experience, I remember you telling me that experience. If you
Mhm.
don't have it on the big screen, then what do you have? But all of this is changing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And one thing that brought us forward into 2022 is when Liz and Cliff and I talked last year, I said, listen, we've got Greenwich Village and the West Village, but I think the division between the West Village and the East Village is sort of arbitrary.
Totally.
And in
Mhm.
terms of the great art and the legacy and the history and the
Thank you.
music and all that's going on, it's all the way across. So I said,
Mhm.
let's go Washington Square Park to Tompkins
love
Square
it.
Park, East Village, West Village, and do the
That's-
whole thing.
That's historic. That
So-
that
Right.
region right there that you just described,
Yeah.
from Tompkins
Yeah.
Square to
Right.
Washington Square.
I love somebody talked about it yesterday who I was talking about who does a true crime tour
Oh, I heard of that. Yeah, right.
Sweet. That
in
would
the
be cool.
East and West Village. But he talked about it. I'd never heard of it before, but he talks about the West Village, the Middle Village, and the East
Ah.
Village.
Yeah.
I-
So he breaks it into like 3
Yeah.
different.
Because I think those were
different-
3 different mob families.
Ah,
Ah!
No,
Yeah,
no, no, no,
Right.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's
probably.
true.
location is everything,
Yeah,
isn't
That
it?
would make
Right.
sense. That would make
Because it
sense.
was interesting, because I lived in Little Italy back in the 80s
Right.
on Mulberry Street between Prince
Oh,
and
that was
Spring.
very
Right.
controlled then.
And that's when John Gotti would
Right.
hang out at the social club
Right.
right
Yeah,
across the
right.
street.
Right.
And I was talking to somebody else recently, and he said, "Oh, he lived a few blocks away, but his area was Vinny the Chin."
Yeah,
Ah!
yeah,
So
exactly.
completely different mob.
But
Yeah,
that's the guy in the
different
that's
family.
the guy in the bathrobe, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
Uh-huh.
That's important when you're talking about your mob members to talk
Exactly.
about the locations. But I do love that you speak of it as downtown, West Village, East Village. All we need, I've always felt there's such a line of demarcation between these places. And now more than ever, with what's going on in our city with the gentrification,
Mhm.
we cannot afford to have lines of demarcation.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. All of you, I'm sure, will recall what I'm talking about. But Upper West Side back in the '80s, the Village, East and West
Yeah.
back in the '80s, and the mob down in the
Mhm.
in Little Italy.
Yeah.
one side of the street was one thing, the other side of the street was the other. There were very definite divisions
Right.
in neighborhoods, and like you can walk up to this street, you know, and then, but then you got to
Absolutely.
cross over
Block
to
to
this street,
block to
right?
block.
Yeah, no,
It was,
right.
and it
Yeah.
was very much like that, and now it's all just seemed whitewashed, and it's just, you know,
And the
all
other thing,
kind
the
of the
difference
same.
between the West Village and the East Village also is a city council district, which is
Yes.
fairly arbitrary.
Yeah.
So in terms of what we're working on and what Liz brought together, it's really all about all this creativity and all this history that's all the way across
Mhm.
and completely cross-pollinated. And I've always loved the idea, Washington Square Park to Tompkins
I
Square
love
Park, because
that.
then it's anchored in parks.
Absolutely,
Yeah, that
absolutely.
we have those parks. They're
Oh,
so important. You all
Right.
remember all the pocket parks that
Mhm.
existed
Yes,
between
right.
the buildings. Now they're putting buildings up where the
Oh,
park.
yeah.
I know, right?
Now, the other party that is not here, if you could tell us a little bit
Liz,
about
yeah.
Liz.
So Liz, she grew up in London, in the
Love London.
60s, and she fell in love
We would
with
love her.
Greenwich Village well
Mhm.
before she ever came here. So she
Wow.
was listening to Joan Baez and Tom Paxton and Bob Dylan
Yeah.
and Phil Oakes, and she was stuck in London, but she had fallen in love with this place. She knew the music. She started doing a little bit of research, and she realized that all these artists were like living like one block
Mhm.
away from each other
Good point.
and crossing paths. And then as she got older, she became an editor at a publishing a magazine for the book trade. And she would come to New York for book fairs and things like that. And then she became enamored of the village as an adult. And she made friends with the owners of the Washington Square Hotel,
Oh wow.
Right.
which, if you know the song Diamonds and Rust from Joan Baez, which is all about her affair with Bob Dylan, it's the crummy hotel over Washington Square.
Can you sing like just
No,
one?
no, no, no. Believe me,
Probably
I do
you
not
would
want
want
you to sing. But she made friends with Judy and Mark Paul, who own the hotel. And Liz was shocked that there wasn't an arts festival for Greenwich Village. She said in England, there would be
Yeah,
an
of
arts
course. They'd be
festival
all over
for
it.
every little two-bit town that ever had a hack writer who had ever
Right.
come from that
Yeah.
place.
Well, that's very
But-
British though, too.
Yes, but I mean, because that whole region that you're talking about is just so rich
Yeah.
With
with
history.
art history.
Yeah.
So the Paul said, look, if you start a festival, we'll help you out. We'll comp you a couple of
Nice.
rooms and things like that. So that gave her a little bit of a foundation to do it. So back in 2018, she had a festival. I think it was about 3 days. I wasn't involved, but she had Suzanne Vega do a
I
free
love Suzanne
concert
Vega,
in
right?
Washington Square Park. So that's sort of the signature event that we have each year.
Mhm,
So the
nice.
first year was Suzanne Vega, then Steve Earle. 2020, guess what? Nothing happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And then
There's a little distraction
I
there.
know. I
obviously.
forget what
reasons.
happened. And then last year we had Bobby Sanabria and his 21-piece multiverse Latin jazz band
Oh,
with
sweet.
Janice Siegel, who's one of the singers from the Manhattan Transfer.
Right, from
Yeah.
Manhattan Transfer, right?
Antoinette Montague, who's a great blues singer.
Fantastic. Yeah, they were
And-
great.
I've lived in the village for like 4 decades. I'd never seen Washington Square so alive. It was really amazing. It was one of the few times I actually got goosebumps on my skin.
Nice.
It was just like
nice.
Yeah.
thinking, this is exactly what I had hoped it would be.
And it also was the
Wonderful.
perfect time.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because
Right,
yeah,
right,
20
absolutely.
September of 2021 was a pretty needy time for something
Yeah.
fun like that.
Absolutely. People were starving,
Yeah.
Right.
starving for
And
that.
we were able to be out going to things
Right.
like this.
Yeah,
So
fine.
But
Liz really interests me in
Mhm.
the fact that she's not from here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really brings out a bigger picture of someone from somewhere else that had an idea that actually got the sensibility of what the village
Right.
is,
Mhm.
and got it in her head that she was going to do it. So Liz,
Mhm.
you're not here with us today,
Yay.
but you are here with us
Absolutely.
in spirit, and thank you for everything that you're.
Yeah.
you're
Now
doing.
you were mentioning Washington Square Park, and because that used to be known for kind of like the community to gather. You'd have
Yeah.
a singer singing over here.
Yeah.
You'd have
Right.
somebody on a guitar playing over there. You'd have somebody speaking political,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
over here. And I love that is the place that you've chosen to do this. That's so wonderful. And the thing that I love about, and this is called the Village Trip, and you can go to
because the
thevillagetrip.com
village is a trip.
or the Village Trip Festival, correct? Okay.
Yeah, but The URL is thevillagetrip.com.
Okay, and you can find out more about this because this is so much more than just a
is.
music festival.
Yeah.
It's incredible, and I would like for you to tell
Yeah.
a little bit about like the walking tours, the everything.
that.
I do too. It's just brilliant, this whole concept.
Yeah, we'll just finish with the concert
I'm
in
sorry.
Washington Square Park.
I'm sorry.
This year,
Tim is so excited. He's
am.
putting the walking
No, no.
tours on his calendar.
So this year we're going to have the Klezmatics
Yes,
and
yes.
a gospel singer named Joshua Nelson,
Mhm.
who is commonly referred to as the Prince of Kosher Gospel.
Mhm.
And the third act in the park will be Reverend Billy and the Church of Stop Shopping. So it's going to
This
be
is so eclectic.
so it's going to
Yeah.
be an amazing klezmer gospel and crazy.
Can you just
anti-capitalist,
explain to people what
yeah.
klezmatic music is?
So klezmer music is the music of Eastern Europe. So mostly the Jews of Eastern
Yeah,
Europe.
Yiddish.
Mhm.
Yeah, Yiddish.
And a lot of the songs are actually in Yiddish.
And fittingly, right, the whole Lower East Side
Yeah.
was all of those
Yeah.
tenements were, the Jews that came here.
Absolutely.
My family on my dad's side, we have a history there. So I love that what Tim was saying, the history,
Mhm.
and you're
Yeah.
bringing it all here.
Yeah. And we're going to have lots of walking tours, as Tim was
Mhm.
pointing out.
I
So
just
we're going to
love
have
that
walking tour called Mad, Bad, and Boho Women of the Village.
yes.
Kathleen Holzer, who's a public historian, she gave it last year and it was great. So it's all about the sort of crazy radical women who have lived in Greenwich Village for the last 150 years.
Wow.
Love it.
And there's been
And
a lot.
there's been a lot, everyone from Eleanor Roosevelt to Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote Raisin in the Sun.
Mhm.
Just amazing people, women especially. I mean, Eve Adams, who ran a speakeasy in the 20s, this was the place.
I didn't know.
And,
Wow.
it was a place where people who didn't fit in anywhere else
Mhm.
could find a place that they
Yeah,
felt at home.
And wonderful town.
So then
Yeah.
we're going to have Jamie Bernstein, who is Leonard Bernstein's daughter.
Wow.
She's going to give a walking tour of sites from Wonderful Town, which was Comden and Green's musical with music score by Leonard Bernstein. And it takes place in Greenwich Village. And it's about two daughters, two sisters from Ohio who come to New York City, live in Greenwich Village, and all their sort of crazy
Which could be
escapades.
anybody, right?
Right.
How many
Yeah.
people have that story?
Yeah.
So there'll be Jamie Bernstein and her sister, Nina Bernstein. So they're going to give a walking tour. And then at the end of the walking tour, it's going to end up at the Washington Square Hotel, where Janice Siegel and some of her friends
Nice.
are going to play some of the music from that musical and some other musicals.
And
as
that
well.
era.
And
Wow,
that
that's
whole
so
whole
cool.
era.
Right.
Cliff, how does Suzanne Vega fit into all of this?
So Suzanne Vega was the very first act in Washington Square Park
Right.
back in 2018. She's going to come back this year
I
in a very
so
different
love
sort of
her.
event. They're going to be modern classical compositions done to words that she's written. And she'll
Wow.
be there as well performing.
How cool is
So
that?
it's going to be a very different sort of event for her, but we're really looking forward to that. And there's going to be a couple of events at Joe's Pub with Bobby Sanabria.
Of course. Right?
David Amram, who is the artist emeritus for the Village Trip and was one of the first people that Liz had contacted. When she got this idea, people said, "Oh, you have to talk to David
And
Amram."
talk about jumping on board.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
he can wait,
he
right?
jumped.
Yeah, yeah.
He's amazing.
So he's 91, going
Wow.
on 26.
I
Yes,
love
exactly.
it.
I mean,
Yeah,
he
he's
has
amazing.
the energy of a 24-year-old, and is the most positive human being I've ever met.
Exactly.
That's why he made it to 91 and
Yeah,
he's totally and
exactly.
completely functional,
Yeah.
right? That's the ticket.
So
And
he's
that
It's
links him
passion.
into
Yes.
because he knew and worked with Jack Kerouac.
so his best
Okay,
friend.
that's what
Yeah,
I was going to
yeah.
ask you about. Jack.
2022 is the centennial for Kerouac.
Okay.
And so that's why his birthday was in March of 1922.
Wow.
And so this is centennial. And David Amram, as well as lots of other things like writing the the score for The Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah.
Right.
Also worked
Wow.
with Kerouac, so that's a direct link. So
And
we're doing-
Kerouac was the electric Kool-Aid acid test.
No,
no,
was Tom
he was
Wolfe.
the author.
that was Tom Wolfe.
It was on the
Yeah,
road.
On the
on the road.
On the road
I remember
with the
reading.
beatnik
I
and-
remember
yeah.
reading that in college. When I was in college, that was the book.
Yeah.
He would, Jack Kerouac was the gold standard. I remember that, and Tom Wolfe, the electric Kool-Aid
Yeah.
acid
Yeah,
test.
but
These
that
books
was
are rich.
Sort of
yeah. Tell us a little more about Jack Kerouac and on
So
the
there's
road.
going to be a whole bunch of events celebrating Kerouac. Kerouac lived in the East Village and the West Village.
Right.
And he and David Amram really, they sort of pioneered the fusing of poetry and jazz. So we just had a launch party at the Figaro Cafe, which recently reopened.
That was June 29th. You did that. I mean,
Correct.
Tim, don't you wish you had known
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
It was a lot of
It
fun.
would have been great.
So we built it as David Amram's first gig at the Figaro in 65 years.
Wow.
So in 1957,
Right.
But
he
who's
and
counting?
Jack Kerouac, perform music and poetry together. Anyway, so he's going to be doing an event at Joe's Pub with Bobby Sanabria, looking at Latin roots to the Beat Generation and
The
jazz.
Beat Generation.
David will also be doing an opening concert for us on 8th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues on September 10th. So that'll be the kickoff event.
Oh, speaking of dates, the,
Yes.
I was
the
just-
Cosmatics is the 24th.
The 24th. So that's
in
the
Washington
end.
Square
September.
Park. That's it.
September. That's the
24th.
last day of the
24th.
festival.
Exactly. So that's since we talked about it, that's in Washington Square Park,
As
September
well.
24th.
That's so
Uh-huh.
great.
Exactly. So
Tim, you
And
would
the
love
festival.
cosmetic music. It's
Uh-huh. Yeah,
he's going to hear it.
Yeah.
He's going to be there.
absolutely.
And all of
absolutely.
you people are going to be there too.
Absolutely. And you're watching If These Walls Could Talk with your hosts, Wendy Stuart and Tim Moss, and our wonderful guests, Dan Sheffey and Cliff Pearson from the Village Trip Festival, which will be here in New York City between September 10th to the 24th.
Bingo.
And so I encourage everybody to come out to this incredible event. Again, it's so much more than like a street fair, like so many
Right.
festivals are just kind of thought, oh, it's this one thing. The depth and the care that you have taken into deciding what
Yes.
you want to present is wonderful.
Over
there's
a 2-week period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. I'm going to take a cue from Cliff, because with Kerouac and what David Amram's doing on opening day on the 10th on 8th Street, we're also going to have that day a new thing which takes its name, which is Tilted Axes, from the Tilted Arc sculpture. And what that is a musical procession of electric guitar players that are mobile, because they have.
See, I was going to ask you about that. I was like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
What is a mobile, just paint the picture for us.
There is a procession of approximately, well, they'll figure it out. They'll figure out, but I'll pick a number. 18 electric guitar players in a procession.
I love
They
this.
they play them mobily, because they play them with their own sound system, and they're going to be marching around and stopping, engaging with people who are on the street. They go by 8th Street, they go through Astor Place, and then back start and end. I was going to start and begin. That would be stupid. Start and end.
Oddly enough, I knew exactly what you were saying.
You were right
Start
there
and
with him.
end.
Right.
At the St. John in the Village Church on
Oh,
11th
St. John
Street.
Church,
Okay.
right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
How,
Isn't that cool?
so it's
That's
very
so
cool, but I'm
cool.
still working with this. They're going to have the electrical, what do you call them? The amps and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
How are they? And
Yeah,
what
like
are they?
They
speakers.
carry them
yeah.
over their
They're
shoulder.
carrying them. That's what I wanted
Yeah.
the picture. They're
Yeah.
like,
They're strapped on so that they can
This
have
is
the.
so
genius.
cool.
They can have that, and they can play the
Tim, you could
guitars.
do your act that like that.
Yeah.
Think about that. You realize what they're talking about? It's like taking the whole thing with you.
Yeah.
You don't
love
have to have a
that.
tech
Love
person
that.
or any. That's.
Exactly.
I had such a question about that.
I know
Thank you
this
for
guy
answering.
Patrick Grant, who tracked us down, and
He
we're
tracked
so-
you down.
He
right,
did, and we're
right.
so glad to have him involved, because that's going to
Wow.
be really cool. And that also is going to link in both West and East Village, which I love.
Yeah.
And we're praying that it won't be any electrical storm.
Yes. That
You
would not be good for
know,
them.
not to be a Dottie Downer, but I was thinking, like, what happens if it rains when they? Well, they probably
Wendy,
have
you're
something
gonna
over
make,
their head.
Wendy, you're going to make the weather perfect.
I am going to make the
Right.
right, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
I'm leaving
it's gonna
that
be
to Wendy and Tim.
sunshiny and
Sunshine and
sunshiny, and they're going to be
lollipops.
marching and
And
with
it'll all be great. So I'm curious about promotion because, we've given the website, but for instance, the June 29th event that
Mhm.
you had, I would have loved to have been at that. So would Tim, but we didn't know about it.
Yeah, that's
You
what
had
I'm
a
talking
show.
about, the
You had a
promotion.
show. You were taping that day.
And I was in, I think I was in Chicago doing. a
You
show.
were in Chicago
Yeah.
and
Oh,
I
I
was
thought
taping
you were taping.
that. I was taping
Yeah.
that day. So to really promote this, I'm going to go back 30 years. You all remember they used to like put on the
Newspapers?
lampposts
Oh,
the
yeah. I love
newspapers
the ones on the
and
on the
all
wall.
of that.
Yeah.
And is there going to be a way where you can put up signage downtown here where
Wow.
people walking by can
Yeah.
see? That was the first thing I thought of, because we all promote on the internet like crazy.
Mhm.
But I got to tell you, there's something to be said. And when I do small events, I do this bulletin boards, community bulletin
Mhm.
boards and stuff like that. Is
And
there a
wild
plan?
posting, you mean wild posting?
Yeah, you call it wild posting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a plan to promote that way? I mean, can we even promote
Because
that way?
that used to be,
any-
yeah, that
Right.
used to be a very village thing.
Right, right.
Uh-huh.
That's what I mean.
And wild posting has somewhat been co-opted where it becomes an advertising mechanism that you have to pay for.
Right.
Rather than
right.
putting
Okay,
things
I
up.
didn't-
Because
I
if
didn't-
you
yeah.
don't put things up without them being approved, they get taken down, especially on construction sites. But anyway,
right.
it's a great idea though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm just full of ideas, but if we can't do anything with
Well,
it.
again, trying
We're
to come
gonna-
up with new creative
We're going to
ways.
come up with ideas.
We'll get you a
with Wendy
bucket
and
of
Tim.
glue and
Exactly.
a big brush.
There,
Yeah.
there you go. There you go. Well, I just love this. One of the aspects of this festival, though, you're going to have a panel of activists talking.
Mhm.
I think because that's important. How can we talk about the village,
Without
the arts, and the
activism.
music
Oh,
without the
yeah.
activism that not only came out of here, that's still happening here? So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, our tagline is arts and activism.
Mhm.
Last year we had Kamau Ware, who runs the Black Gotham experience, and he gave a tour of Greenwich Village, pointing out that the very first non-Indigenous residents of Greenwich Village were Black farmers, which
Mm.
most people don't know.
I had
Wow.
right. I love hearing
Wow.
this. Right, that's him right now on the phone.
Because they had been living in New Amsterdam all the way down the south. The Dutch West India Company gave them land grants to farm the land up in the northern, outer rings of New Amsterdam, which was Greenwich Village.
Very interesting.
Very
if you
far
said-
north
Right.
then.
Yeah, it was.
Mhm.
It was the
Right.
boonies. And there's a lot of historians who believe that underneath Washington Square Park, there are African-American burial
Mhm.
sites.
Wow.
So,
I had no idea with all the
Right.
history. I know that's amazing.
and there was a large Latin community in the East Village, Latino tobacco workers. I didn't realize this.
Tobacco workers.
There was a
wow.
lot of tobacco warehouses and factories and things like that.
And cigar rollers.
So we want to celebrate all of that. We're going to have a panel discussion talking about Eleanor Roosevelt's legacy.
Wow.
We're going to have an inaugural village trip lecture given by Professor Robert Snyder, who is Professor Emeritus at Rutgers University, but he's also the Manhattan Borough historian, a job I didn't even know existed.
I didn't
Yeah.
either. My
So
God.
he's gonna
I
give-
was like, who knew?
Who knew? Anyway,
I'll sign up.
so he's going to give a talk about global Greenwich Village, talking about people from around the world who came to Greenwich
Right.
Village
Right.
and shaped, the
Yeah.
city and the world, and then also how Greenwich Village shaped the rest of the planet.
Right.
So-
I
What came
was
in
just
and what
gonna
went out.
say that. Yeah.
So it's a two-way street back and forth. And that's what makes Greenwich Village one of the most unique neighborhoods in the world.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's
Right.
really only a handful of neighborhoods like this.
Mhm.
And we want to make sure that it doesn't get lost under real estate development and
Right.
stuff like that.
And the corporations coming in
Yeah.
and running the mom and pop
And
shops
NYU
out and-
buying up
Well, I was-
almost every
Yeah.
single block around here. It's unbelievable.
I know. And on the other side of NYU.
Are they
is-
one of your sponsors? I'll keep
No,
my mouth shut.
no. All I'm saying is,
We have gotten some money from NYU.
but I do
Good for
love that,
NYU.
that NYU students
Absolutely.
don't know a lot.
They're the
Right,
next generation.
right.
You're
And
going
they
to share
also
it. Yeah,
love to know it. And I love the
Absolutely.
eagerness that a lot of students from NYU or finding
Nice,
to
nice.
know what's going on in the East
Yeah.
Village and the West Village and where they are.
Well,
Because it's easy to go to a school and you don't know
Mhm.
anything
And there's
that's
no,
going
you
on.
know,
Right,
to your
exactly.
point, I often, when we see the kids down here, I always say to Alan, they don't even know where they are. They're going to
Right.
NYU.
Bingo,
There's
right.
nothing being
They-
done to talk about the history of where they're living. So again, thank you again.
Yeah,
right, and don't
yeah.
appreciate the history of the land that they're in. They're
Exactly.
Come on
occupying.
in.
Yeah.
We'll
So,
tell you all
but
about it.
that's one of the things is why do you suppose that this particular area on the planet was so attractive to so many progressive minds, both in art and I don't know about industry, but political, social change. Like people,
Why
there was
here?
so much that came from this area
Mhm.
Yeah.
that changed the way we see life and we exist now in America and probably even around the world.
It's because it was traditionally a cheap place to live.
Mm-hmm.
So, cheap places to live that's where the artists would go. That's where the writers would
Mhm.
go.
Right.
That's where the musicians would go. And when I moved to the village, like in 79, 1980, a lot of the West
Wow.
Village was still very Italian. You go on Bleecker Street and there's still FICO's, pork store and Rocco's
Yeah.
Right.
pastry.
Yeah.
It used to be all Italian places.
Mhm.
I
And the
remember,
East Village is all Ukrainian. So
Exactly.
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
and,
Yeah, exactly.
And
And-
Polish and yeah.
Yeah.
and the East Village really used to
Good.
be called the Lower East Side.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for 150 years, it was a place where immigrants from around the world could
Right.
Would
live.
come.
Right.
So first it was Ukrainian, then it
Well, the
was just-
Germans in that period of time too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the Irish, didn't the Irish and kind of come into that
Yeah,
in
all
the
of
Lower
them.
East Side and
Lower
yeah.
East Side, yeah.
And it served this purpose of having a place where immigrants could come, they could get set up, find an inexpensive place to live, make some money, then they would move elsewhere, and another immigrant group would come in. And immigrants are the blood of America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without immigrants, you would have so much
Nothing.
less
Mhm.
in terms of culture, music, food. So we want to celebrate all of that.
But something, Tim, that you just asked, yes, the immigrants, but we still I'm very woo 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 out there. I believe, as many do, that it's a vortex right here.
Yeah,
That
some
it's
type of energy or
right,
something
an
that's-
energy
that
vortex
attracts.
that attracts. When you start to talk about from East Village to West Village and this whole area, the amount of artists that have come out of here.
Wasn't the factory like Andy Warhol? Was that here in that area, or I forget where that was?
It was Union Square, I believe.
That was
Yeah,
Union
well,
Square,
it's
but
just
that's
on the
yeah,
fringe.
yeah, it's still on
Yeah.
the cusp. But right, good.
We
But it's-
welcome them in.
there's-
yeah.
We embrace
Yeah,
it all.
but that's what I mean. There was just something about this area that just fed artistic and social experimentation.
It was an
or-
energy,
or, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
An energy
it's
that attracted
writers,
people.
It's music,
Yeah.
it's
it's
performers,
amazing.
it's theater.
Yes.
The public theater is right in the
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that was only the public theater when in the last 60 years?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
50 years maybe.
50
50
years.
years.
I was trying to hit it, but certainly 50 years in the park, but where they moved there. Anyway, that sort of cauldron of creativity, I like that you call it a vortex because it's true.
Yeah,
It's
Uh-huh.
all these people. The people moved in and out from other parts of the world, but the one through line that always happened was artists,
Right.
and music, and
Mhm.
performers, and this sort of electricity of creativity.
the need to create.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but sadly, over the past couple decades, especially, there's been more of greed and it seems to be more based on money and rather than on artistic and
Yeah.
social what
Although-
it always stood for.
Although that's not exclusive to the East or West
Right.
Village.
Oh,
It's like-
absolutely,
Yeah.
it's
No,
everywhere.
I know you're not saying that,
It's
but
Yeah.
it's like,
society
yeah.
moved in, which kind of again I bring up Jack Kerouac and his because he kind of went against that corporate consumerism
Very much so.
that he was an alternative for that, and that's kind of
Right.
I think what was so popular and spread kind of in this area was the beatnik, which opened the doorway for the hippies, which was kind of the next
Right.
decade to follow.
what was those stages of counterculturalism?
Yes,
The
yeah, that's the word,
counterculture,
counterculture. Yeah,
Right.
The counterculture was
Has always existed down
Mhm.
here.
different
down
in the
here.
40s and from the 30s to the
Right.
60s to the 50s, the 70s, 80s, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
We
But
have
it was the
a
through
friend that I don't know if Joe Preston is watching, but this particular area that we're in, his whole family is like legacy for the
Mhm.
East Village. Now, Joe, he's Italian, but and I know we were saying it's Ukrainian over here, but you know, his grandmother, Slugger Ann, owned the bar right on the corner. But Joey is an amazing historian because the stories he tells of what it was like here, and back in those days, they had these dance hall girls that were basically, you know, paid to. Right, they were paid to dance. Well, we don't know what else went on, but
What do you mean?
I don't know what you're talking about. But what he, you know, I love sitting and talking to him. He is, you know, what I call hardcore New York. And thanks to people like you, these stories are now going to be passed down. And you're right, the kids that have moved into this neighborhood, there may be in this big corporatism that we're all experiencing right now, there's always going to be creatives. And because you're doing this festival, you're lighting the fire under some of them, you know.
Got to wave the flag.
You got to wave the flag.
Right.
Right.
And I wish I had a grandmother named Slugger Ann.
Right, right. Love that. Love that.
I know.
But yeah, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was really encouraged last year, you know, in the spring and the summer with all the Black Lives Matter protests. They used Washington Square as one of their central locations.
Yeah.
So it was Washington Square being Washington Square.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really important, that it hasn't, even in this day, lost that role as a place, as you were saying, Tim, where people can gather, protest, sing songs. So, I mean, it's still alive, but we have to maintain that flame.
Right. A place for the voice of the people.
Exactly.
Oh, right. That's really well put. Pride. There was the main Pride March and the second march, which was going to Washington Square Park, which ended that started at 2:00, is a good example of that. Once again, Washington Square Park.
And at one point, because I came to from the downtown one, was going across the north end of Washington Square Park, and the other one was going across 8th Street.
Oh my
And if you looked up McDougal, you could see one going this way and the other going that way.
That just about summed it up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Going opposite directions. Right.
A tale of two marches. So New
good.
York.
Oh my goodness.
So, Dan, you know, you grew up in Philadelphia. You have affiliated with New York from the get-go, but you came from Philly. What was it, your initial feelings about New York that just turned you on so much? I love hearing, you know, what made you passionate. What brought you?
Well, Philadelphia is far enough away that it's far away, but it's close enough that I actually came as a kid.
Oh, cool.
And not a lot, but I sort of like the idea of New York. And I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and I was finishing school, and out of school, I got offered 2 jobs, one in Washington, D.C. and one in New York. The job in Philadelphia, they didn't want me. That was a TV job.
Overqualified.
Yeah, they thought I needed to go to a smaller market and come back. So I went to New York instead.
That is right.
I'll show you a smaller
Yeah,
market.
right.
I'll show you a
That's
smaller
right.
market.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right. You don't want me? Well, I'll
So-
show you.
And I wound up on the Upper West Side. So I love New York. And I guess it was it's that magnetism, because I was further away, but I wound up here.
Right. Tim from Indiana.
Yeah, I'm originally from the Midwest.
What was the
Indiana.
pull? What was your magnetic pull?
Well, I was an entertainer. I was a singer and actor, and at that time, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all of this, so you either had to go to New York or to LA. And I just chose New York, even though I hated it at the time because it was filthy, it was big, it was dangerous.
Interesting.
I'm by myself, and also I was gay,
Right.
so I had to leave everything and everyone I ever knew to move to
Your
a
comfort
dangerous
zone,
city
right.
by myself, just so I could live outwardly.
And did it take a while for you to become comfortable and love it, or was it?
Oh my God! Oh well, I took all kinds of detours into drugs and alcohol, and literally 20 years led to an extreme drug and alcohol addiction that probably should have killed me. But once I came out on the other side, my eyes were open, and I was like, "This is really an amazing city." And that's when I was like, "Let me get back into what I love."
And you grabbed it.
Yeah, and that's what helped pull me out too, along with a lot of counselors and doctors and therapists. But
all part of the
part of the process.
Well, here's to you.
It's interesting. I grew up in the Bronx, and Tim does so much work for the LGBTQ community. But growing up in the Bronx, my mother had been a model that came from Connecticut, and she was Miss Connecticut in 1935. Came to New York to model with Lucille Ball,
Wow.
and a woman named Shirley Schrift, who was Shelley Winters.
Oh,
And the three
my
of them.
my mother actually grew up in the same block as Shelley Winters.
So your mother
In
could say
Brooklyn.
Shirley Schrift. So
And she was always told by her mother, don't hang out with that Shelley Winters. She's a bad
news. She's a bad girl. But I grew up with these stories of modeling in New York and Lucille Ball and all of these people that were icons to me. So living in the Bronx, right? I had stars in my eyes. That's I knew I was going to, as soon as I could, come here, and that is exactly what happened.
Well, oddly enough, for me, I had always heard, oh, you've got to pay your dues, and it's going to be rough, and it's going to be nasty, and that's what I experienced.
That's what you did.
Right, because I was like, well, I may as well get it out of the way now.
and did you ever, right? Just
If
go
you're going to
big.
do it, do
Tim,
it.
go big or go
all the
home.
way.
Right, go bigger or go home.
And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, luckily, I'm stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the concept of this festival, have you found that in general corporations are on board with it? Like, what's been the feedback or pushback, if there has been any, to do a project like this?
People get it.
They
People
get it.
I mean, the bigger corporations don't always get it.
Right.
We actually pitched a big corporation that's a big developer, and they have like 4 different storefronts on Bleecker Street. And they were very nice. We did a Zoom with like 4 people from their team and everything, and they're very polite. But they basically said, we're only interested in the 3 blocks that these storefronts are on. And I tried to explain to them, Bleecker Street's part of a larger place called
absolutely.
Greenwich Village.
Right.
And, Bleecker Street doesn't really exist without Greenwich Village.
Absolutely.
And they didn't quite get
For the whole town.
Can I ask, were they younger?
I mean, they were sort of middle-aged. I mean,
Okay.
they weren't like old farts.
Uh-huh.
But, they're,
Kind of caring way.
I mean, they're corporate people, and they're always trying to figure out, like, how do I explain this to the boss who
Right.
God knows where he is?
Right.
Or she
Right.
is.
Probably not
Again,
even
and the
in
boss,
New York.
And the
right.
boss also
Right.
can be,
Well, that
25.
goes back to the stuff you were asking about media and how that's changed. It's become very blindered.
Exactly.
Because
well
it's
put.
niche.
Right.
And at another point in our lives that was much broader. And now it's sort of so focused that it's hard. So
Exactly.
that's sort of emblematic where you're looking at 3 blocks rather than a whole city or a whole
Right.
neighborhood or a
Mhm.
whole breadth of
Right.
Yeah.
lower Manhattan.
And that's also kind of true. It's a glaring case of, like when you were mentioning the Little Italy and the East Village and the West Village, and Joe Preston is a perfect example of how it used to be community.
Yeah.
You used to be part of this world within those few block radiuses. And now it's not. Now it's like this corporate mentality of oh, well, we're on this block, that's all we're worried about. You know what I mean?
And I'll add one
I'm
thing to
tired
that
of that.
though, because I agree with you, but I think to a certain degree, in a good thing coming out of the pandemic, there's a way in which some of that neighborhood
Mhm.
spirit and that some of the
Yeah.
connection
No, you're right.
I agree.
came back and
Yeah.
happened. And it hadn't happened for a while, and it felt very disconnected and discombobulated. But I think that what we had to live with and how we reconnected with where we live
Yes.
Mhm.
and who we live with was really
Yes,
important.
I agree.
I think I hope that stays. I think it stays.
I
We're not
agree.
going to forget it. But anyway,
One of the things that just touching on was when we used to at 7:00 used to lean out the windows and clap
Yeah,
and do all of
with
that
the pots and
to thank
pans.
all of the
Yeah.
The workers,
first right
first
the first
responders.
responders. And I just remember some of my neighbors across the street that I've lived in my apartment for 40 years. I've never seen them
never.
Yeah.
before, or I didn't know them. I might see them on the street, but I'm on my way over here and they're on their way over here.
Right.
And I just remember every day we would lean out the window and we'd wave at each
Mhm.
other.
I love it.
And
Right.
so that I see what you mean by that
Yeah.
community. That did kind of bring community back,
Yeah.
which
And
I
people
love.
started
And that's what you're doing is you're expanding
Yes.
that idea, which I love. I love this.
people started hanging out on stoops during the
Yeah,
pandemic.
Absolutely.
Because it was the only, you didn't want to meet people indoors, and you weren't going to let them inside your apartment. So people would go out on their stoop, they'd bring a bottle with them or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they got to actually talk to their neighbors. which was-
Exactly.
Right.
What a strange idea.
Right,
What a
right.
concept.
Well, I can tell you for PANGEA, you know, they were shut down, but they were serving outside. So this show came from sitting out there. It was
Yeah.
freezing cold.
Yeah.
They had a heat
Oh,
lamp.
that's great.
Yeah, we were
And,
having dinner out there.
and I'm like, wow, we should do a show, a live stream
Mhm.
inside. There's no one in there, right? Who cares if it's cold? We have the computer, and you know, we can. At that point, we couldn't bring people like
Right.
flesh in.
Yeah.
We could only stream them. But what could be better, right?
And we helped to promote Pangea and
We
what they're
did,
going through, and
right.
that
And the
people can
GoFundMe,
still come and
right.
eat outside. And
right. And kudos to Penny Arcade, who has done.
I was going to
She
mention
just
Penny.
had her birthday here. You know, she's the one that really promoted the GoFundMe here.
Mhm.
I signed up for her Patreon,
Love
so
Penny.
a portion of it would come to here. It was a win-win for everybody in the truest sense. It really brought our whole community together.
And what we would always say is because Pangea has always been a supporter of the arts. They've always
Yeah,
had
I
a
know.
cabaret room and
Absolutely.
entertainment and jazz and all of and that it was time for us to take care of them because
Penny for pennies.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
And
do.
Pangea, speaking of which, will be having shows almost every night during
Right.
the festival. So they're one of our partners,
Yep.
a new partner this year, and we're really glad to be working with
Yay.
Yeah, they're
Pangea.
Yay,
wonderful.
Pangea.
So from September 10th through September 24th, there's going to be something happening at Pangea almost every evening, and Penny
Love it.
Arcade will be here at least one of those evenings.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
One-
Yeah.
absolutely.
And once again, you are watching If These Walls Could Talk with your hosts, Wendy Stuart and Tim Moss, our amazing guests from the Village Trip
Thank you.
Festival,
Village Trip.
Dan Sheffey and Cliff Pearson. And please go to their website, thevillagetrip.com, and you can find out all about everything that they're offering, and which again is
Yeah.
so vast and just so
great.
rich
It's so great.
in reminding us of what the village, Greenwich Village and the East Village has produced over the years. And we're
And
so
keeps
grateful
producing.
for
and,
that.
and, keep-
Exactly.
and keeps
Absolutely.
producing.
Absolutely.
Tim, do we have any comments today?
I
or
honestly
we're so
cannot.
far, we
yeah.
can't access our comments.
This is the first time we've had 4
There's
people, so we had to
4
move the computer so far
Oh,
away.
God.
If you'll excuse me for a second.
It's a menage a quad. Oh, we have comments.
Let me
which I can't
see.
Oh, good.
Let me put on my glasses.
I think that might be Teresa Sabin, the Facebook user.
Yes, thank you, Teresa,
Said
for
small
tuning
world.
in.
Joel Eifert says, "Love this conversation."
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Hey,
Let me see. I think that's
Tim, you
I
have
can't-
good
oh,
eyes.
Sue Stutzman says hello. Our
Yes.
designer.
Great supporter of the arts,
Yes.
Sue's designer.
Yes. And I think that's about it. I can't read.
Yeah, I
and
can't
don't have
read
glasses.
it either. Oh, well. I can't even read with the glasses. So there you have it.
But thank you, everybody. We so
Yeah,
appreciate
we-
your tuning in and
And tell your friends about the festival, please.
absolutely.
So, you know, you're talking about the Lower East Side and the Village. Do you have, like, when you look into your crystal ball, do you have any plans on expanding it
well, I think it's always going to be based in Greenwich Village.
Mhm.
Greenwich
as the
Village,
core?
West Village, East Village. I mean, if we have something on 15th Street or 16th Street,
Yeah.
fine. I mean, again, we're not going to have these hard barriers. There's no Berlin
Right.
Wall
Yeah.
separating above 14th Street. And my wife
Right.
does say if she goes
I
above
think she gets a
14th, she
nosebleed.
gets a nose.
All right.
But that's only figuratively. But I think, the identity is the village.
Right.
And it's, village is a concept as well.
Mhm.
So the concept is, arts, activism, and people coming together. One thing, going back to Jack Kerouac,
Yes.
we're going to have a reading of On the Road.
Oh,
Yes.
sweet.
That will be at the Strand Bookstore.
I love the Strand. Wow.
And it's going to be really great. David Deblinger, who's an actor and director, is organizing it, orchestrating it. We're going to have a bunch of different readers. He hopefully is going to bring some people, well-known people that he knows.
Very cool.
David Amram and 3 other musicians are going to play music during the reading.
Oh, so
Um,
cool.
So that's going to be really fantastic. I think the date is September 17th, I believe.
I'll
sure.
say yes.
I think it's
Check
Check
the
the
website.
They said in unison. I love that.
Thank you, Tim.
So,
Perfect.
it's not going to be a full reading. We were hoping or thinking about maybe doing like a big read, which would take about 12 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we
Yeah.
realized it's just too many moving parts and
Yeah.
nobody really wants to.
And you lose people.
Yeah, you
too.
definitely
You know,
lose
people
people.
have no concentration.
So this will be about 2
That's
hours
great.
of on the road.
Yeah, but I would recommend everybody do read Jack Kerouac's On the Road. He was kind of a voice for that beatnik
Yeah,
generation.
The
that
beat generation.
Do you know how he wrote it? The other
No,
thing that
No,
I-
no,
I
I
don't.
love
he
tidbits
wrote
like
it
this.
on one roll of paper that
Stop
he
it.
put together. I think I may be mistaken, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think he got it. It was like teletype paper when the news used to come out across the
Right.
teletype. So he used one long paper, and there's actually it exists somewhere. I forget where the archive
Yeah.
is, but he wrote the book in a typewriter on one, and it's
Wow.
all on one.
One
roll
Like
of
a
paper.
scroll,
continuous
as if
read.
you took
Oh,
it out.
No,
It's
I
like,
suspect obviously that it could have been cut and then repasted so that it becomes
Right.
one roll. But anyway, but
That's
it actually
great
was
trivia.
written. Isn't that great?
that's
I
great.
love that.
Is
I
that
love
where is it? Do you know where
I
it's
was
archived?
saying it's in the archive somewhere. right?
It was
I would-
bought by a very wealthy guy a few
Oh,
years
good, he
ago.
Oh, somebody's collection.
Yeah, but I think he may have given it to some place where it's accessible. So
Yeah.
I'm not exactly
We'll
sure where
Google it and get back to
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So just go on the road, scroll,
Yes,
and
exactly.
you'll find it.
But I love that he wrote
Great,
it that way.
great little
Yep,
story.
yep.
Well,
I
thank
am
both of you for coming here today.
Yes, and
and
thank
How
you,
much fun are
Liz.
you two?
thank you, Liz. Thank you, Pangea.
Thank you, Liz.
Of course, I can't remember if it was Arnaldo or Stephen who made the introduction between us. It was one of them.
You know who also did it? Donna Florio.
Oh God, I love
So-
Donna.
Right,
Yes.
Donna was
Yes.
part of that.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking
was
of
it
Donna,
Donna?
Florio, what's
Hi, Donna.
Donna's? She was on the
Didn't
show. What's
she-
the name of her
Born
book?
Bank Street.
The
Born on
Bank
Bank
Street,
Street, yeah.
yes.
Or growing-
And that's I
growing
was just
up Bank
thinking of
Street.
her as
Growing
we
up Bank
were
Street,
talking. I was thinking that history is part
Yes.
of this.
Yeah, Donna Florio, Growing Up Bank Street. Her book was incredible.
Beautiful.
The stories
Yes.
of with the opera singers and
Yes.
Donna's involvement
Just-
in the
And
She
all
was
of the
great. I love her.
eccentric characters in the
Right.
one building,
She's a
you know,
great
like,
person.
and that's
She's
so
wonderful.
village. That's so village. That's so
And that's also
community.
so village that she brought us together too, along with
Yes.
Stephen and Pangea.
totally
perfect.
It takes a
absolutely.
village.
Exactly.
I said that in my advertising for this show. I wrote, it takes a village, and I'm like, oh, that's so hokey.
It
People
takes
are
a,
going to
Well,
read
we
that.
should
Leave it to me. That should be hokey. Yeah.
it takes a Greenwich.
Oh.
I like that, Tim. Right. I should have. Right. I should have said that. Thank you both very much.
Oh,
Thank you.
The Village Trip Festival, September 10th through the 24th. Go to the website. You
The-
can
the
print it
village-
out.
Thevillagetrip.com.
Yep. And, carry your schedule with you. That I have to do that with everything,
Yeah.
so that I make sure I show up.
And for the village trip, the publicity director, Dan Sheffey,
Yes.
and the artistic director, Cliff Pearson, have been
Yay!
our guests
Joint
today.
artistic.
Thank you.
Oh, joint artistic.
Joy, because Liz is the other.
She's the
yeah.
Oh,
other.
okay.
She's the founder of the other.
Okay.
Okay.
She's
great.
my cohort in crime.
But I just want
She'll
to,
come and visit you too.
oh, I love that.
That'd be good.
Thank you, Dan.
That'd be
Thank you,
great.
Cliff, so very
Thank
much.
you.
I appreciate
Tim.
it. I appreciate getting to
Tim,
know you
thank
and
you.
hearing more about the
Absolutely.
festival.
And-
you.
Wendy, thank you.
Well, see you in September.
You bet.
Absolutely. That should be a song title.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Or lose you to summer love.
There you go. Bye, everybody.
Bye.